Hello and welcome to the Leading Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Dubose. Here in the Leading Lounge, we talk with today's leaders and unpack lessons learned and being learned from a career of leading and communicating in their field. These conversations are designed to be both informal and informative, and we want to equip you with wisdom and tools to empower you as a leader where you are and where you want to be. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 21 of the Leading Lounge. If you love people who are non-traditional, unconventional, and don't fit neatly into any category or box, then you're going to really love today's guest. I interviewed Eddie DeJesus, who has a fascinating background, starting with troubled youth, which forced him to join the Army as a young teenager. Had to have his father's permission, but at 17 was court ordered to join the Army and got some discipline and some maturity. Came out, joined the NYPD, and served as a sergeant in the NYPD for a number of years. While he was there, he ended up studying church planting under Pete Scazzero and Tim Keller there in New York City, and planted his first church after doing some internships and apprenticeships and things. Planted his first church up in New York City and then transplanted all the way down to Florida and pastored there for almost 20 years, as well as planting a number of churches while he was a pastor there, and then recently moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area here in Texas and oversees church planting for a 4-state district in the Christian and Missionary Alliance. Eddie's a wonderful man, and in this interview, he gets very raw and open about his own shortcomings and some of the lessons he's learned. And so if you're in ministry or if you're a non-traditional, unconventional type of person, I know this interview will be a blessing to you. So listen up and enjoy everything he has to say here in this interview. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Leading Lounge. I got a special guest today, my brother, Eddie DeJesus. So, Eddie, appreciate you giving me some time and joining me. You got an interesting background. You're not a cookie cutter anything. You don't fit into anybody's box. You color way outside the lines. And so I'm just excited to pick your brain a little bit.
It's my Crooklyn background.
Well, let me just throw the first question out at you, Eddie, and then we'll take it from there. The first question I like to ask everybody is just to tell their story. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey that got you to where you are today in Arlington?
Well, it's been a journey. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were both born and raised in Puerto Rico. And so they came here to the United States primarily to find work. There was no work in Puerto Rico. And so at an early age, my dad worked in the factory pretty much his entire life. My mom has started showing mental illness in her early 20s, in and out of mental institutions most of my life.
Oh, wow.
2, 3, 4 months out of the year, she was in the hospital, and I ran the streets. And so eventually that caught up with me, and I found myself around 15 or 16 in front of a judge because I was doing stupid. And the judge back then gave me the option of either going to a juvenile correction facility called Spofford or joining the Army.
There we go.
Military. And so I thought choice number 2 was a little bit better. And so I ended up with my father's consent. He signed off at 17. June 27th, I graduated high school. June 30th, I was hoofing a pack at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Wow.
And by that time, I was wild and such. And then I realized that I kind of enjoyed the structure. I enjoyed being told when to get up, when to go to bed, when time to eat, how to take care of my one uniform. Mm-hmm. And I was a good soldier. And so kind of loved the camaraderie, with the guys, and I didn't mind hard work. So the military actually was a tremendous influence in my life. I was heading in a real dark place. And so I think God used that to really kind of just put some common sense back in my brain. I ended up getting out. Then I ended up meeting my lovely, who will eventually be my wife, Norma, at Times Square with her buddies. And so it's kind of where we met the day or two before her 18th birthday. Ended up meeting the love of my life, which was a kind of a good thing. We got married not too long after. And so we were young kids, young, dumb, and poor. And, so, and the military was not going to pay for such. So I ended up going into the reserves, and by the grace of God, I joined the NYPD, which had medical benefits and better income, and the traveling thing was not going to work in a relationship in the military. So, but I stayed in the reserves probably my whole time, about 12 years. And then I ended up retiring from the police department. And so in the middle of that, didn't grow up in a Christian home. So my dad to this day, he's 85 years old. So pray for him. He's always told me, son, stay away from pastors. All they want is your money or your wife. They're bad people.
Wow.
And yeah. So I started going to a church. Actually, it was an Alliance church by a man named Pete Scazzero. He was doing cell groups at the time following a pattern by a guy named Ralph Neighbors, who wrote this book on cell group ministries. And anyway, started doing home meetings in the house. I was an apprentice for one of the NIAC students who were given their MDiv, and realized that sometimes there's a little bit more skill level than just education. There are practicums in building relationships and some other things that sometimes there needs to be a combination of both. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but just a combination of both.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's kind of basically how I started getting involved in church and in ministry. And my passion for church planning didn't come until Pete Scazzero and Tim Keller from Redeemer Presbyterian are good friends. And so I started going to some of the courses that Tim Keller was doing there at Redeemer in Manhattan. He was starting his church planning network.
Oh, wow.
Tim blew my mind.
Dude, he's unbelievable. He's one of my favorite people ever.
I would sit down there and try to write as fast as I could what he wrote, and it would take me a month to unpack what he just said, the statement. He's so bloody smart. And so I said to myself, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I ended up retiring early from the police department so I could follow a call in ministry. And so kind of here I am. That's kind of like the big chunks.
What was the overlap between when you were in the reserves and when you were also in NYPD? Was there any overlap where you were doing those?
Yeah, there was a lot of it was overlap. The nice thing with the NYPD, since it's a large department, every time I'd go away from my ATs and my drills, I would get my sergeant's pay, and then I get my police pay at the same time. Yeah, you know.
So while you were doing both of those, you weren't actively doing any ministry other than like the ministry preparation stuff, the apprentice with the cell groups, the going to study at Redeemer Presbyterian, all that. Correct.
So it was all kind of with a wife, 3 kids, and a mortgage.
Yeah. I know that life. Well. So, young, dumb, and broke. So that's like the first 10 years of our marriage, man. So after you left New York, I know you went to Florida. Did you go immediately from New York to Florida, or did you have some?
So we ended up anyway. We were doing the small groups in the home, and I loved the whole discipleship piece. So my natural APES. So I'm more of your apostolic evangelist. So I'm always after souls. That to me is the motivating factor of why we do anything. And so once I became the leader of our small group, we're going to go out, we're going to do park outreaches, we're going to do door to door, whatever. We're just going to share the gospel. And the groups began to grow. And I started then always had an apprentice for me so that when the group got, 12, 14 people, then we'd multiply and then the other one. And so we went from 2 groups to 4 groups to 6 groups to 8 groups. And, this thing just kept on growing. And And the more people we had, the bigger outreaches we were able to do. So I was having a blast. Anytime I wasn't working, I was at church. And then eventually I ended up planting there in New York. So Pete commissioned Norm and I, and we ended up launching, and then we ended up planting congregation. And so I've always been bivocational. So I've always worked a job and then pastored. I didn't collect a salary. And so I didn't need to because I had a job. So it's not that I'm projecting that. I'm just saying that's what I felt God me to do. And the church grew. The struggle was when the church got over 100 between weddings and funerals and baptisms and baby dedications and hospital visits and elder meetings. And I had meetings in the morning. I had to do a 4 to 12. And I had meetings at night. I had to do a day tour. And I had meetings in the morning and night. I'm doing a midnight. And I reached the limit of my ADHD energy level. And I had to choose between whether I was going to stay in law enforcement and pass the church on to get my full retirement or just follow what I felt God's call and let him trust. So I was able to vest and lock in a pension. It was reduced because I didn't complete the full 20.
Right.
But then just went full boat into, the church plan. Church got to about 120 or so when then by some craziness, God ended up giving us a call to go to Florida to plant. So that's how we ended up going to Florida.
Gotcha. Okay. And you were there how many years before you came our way over to Texas?
So, which is shocking to me because I'm not the typical long-term pastor. Like I come in, I'm excited. Let's do evangelism. Let's reach the neighborhood. Let's build this thing up. And then about 3 to 5 years, I'm like, okay, you can have it. I'm going to go off to the next one. But I ended up being in Florida for 17 years.
Wow.
And I think what happened was, unbeknownst to me, so we started planting, we meeting in a school, started to grow, same thing, small groups, meeting in the home. We always started planting from meeting in the homes, proclaiming the gospel, making the disciples, and then training up leaders in their APEST. And then God just does what he does. So as we started to grow, and we ended up some miracle, so many other things, but we ended up buying a facility there, a church facility, and it was a small one. So naturally the pressure was with the church, well, let's just raise more money and build big. And I'm like, I don't want to waste money on property. God owns it all anyway. Let's invest money in people. And so we started then investing. I did an internship, my own internship, kind of mirrored from what Pete was doing at New Life and what Tim had done at Redeemer. And so all of a sudden I started raising up these lions who wanted to plant. And so we started, okay. So I thought, that's a great way. So we just keep on sending people away so we have to worry about building. But the more people we kept on, so we were on our 5th church plant from our congregation. But every time we'd send off 40, 50, 60 people, we'd get that back in about 6 months. Now I'm running 3 services at New Life. I'm doing a Saturday night, 2 on Sunday. We're planning churches. And I'm like, oh my God, this thing. But that kept a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit running because we were planting. And I think that's the reason why I'm staying there for 17 years.
So you were there that long, but you still weren't ever a traditional pastor. So a traditional long-term pastor. You were your ADHD kingdom gift was always at work doing different things.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I actually had to ask. I had to go to my elders and get permission from them. So, like in my APES, pastor is last.
Yeah, mine is too.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is, naturally, as you're the lead pastor, the expectation is you're going to everybody's wedding and funeral and hospital visits, whatever, which I'm terrible at. Not that I don't care. I don't love people. It's just. I'm
with you. I used that as an example in my sermon the most recent Sunday. I was like, look, here's a moment of transparency. Visitations, all this, pastor's supposed to love it. I hate it. Like, I'm not good at it. I don't enjoy it. Like, I'm sorry. I just don't.
No, I sat down with our elders and I said, listen, I need your permission. And 2, I need you to have my back. Because the congregation is going to kill me. And I said, because I said, I need you guys to be able to pastor the congregation, because now naturally the staff and you guys and my interns is probably about the breadth of the energy I have to be able to do that semi well.
Yeah.
But we got 450 people coming and the pressure's on, and I'm trying to invest in this leadership. We got church planning going on,
Yep.
And the others, and they understood, they had been with me for a long time. They understood where it was. They really had a kingdom heart. And so then I had to then tell the congregation over and over. I said, listen, I love you guys. But if the expectation, if you're coming to New Hope, that I'm going to be at all of your, all of your birthday parties and all these other things, I said, it's just not possible for me. And so, not that we're not going to care. My responsibility as lead pastor is to make sure those things happen.
Right, yeah. But not that you're the one personally doing them all.
Right. So if you're in the hospital, someone from the church is going to go visit you. If you're not involved in one of our home churches, then you should be involved in the whole church, because they'll be at all your parties.
Right.
So anyway,
that's cool.
It was a transition.
So you're in the DFW area now, and you've been here how long? 4 years, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah. So it's going to be 3 years actually in August. So it's not even 3 yet. Okay. And so started with the Alliance Central District, August of 2020. Okay. Is when the
gotcha. And for those who don't know Eddie, doing church planting, trying to help the district plant churches and do what you do best, brother. So I'm going to shift to specifically a leadership question, and you are one of less than a handful of guys I know who fit this same mold, like me and some other guys I have in mind, where you didn't go from being a youth to being a pastor or to being in ministry work. You had this other thing that required a totally different leadership style and skill set and all that kind of stuff. So in your case, you mentioned you went from military, Army NCO to law enforcement, and from there, God used that to then transition you into ministry roles. So my question is, what leadership experiences carried over well into ministry from your military and law enforcement background? And then what maybe did you have to unlearn or relearn from the Army and NYPD as you go into ministry? Because I know from personal experience, as I still juggle the Army as an officer on one hand and a pastor on the other, if I go into the field, even just for a week or two, and I come back as Major DeBose, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, wait. These aren't my troops here. I gotta recalibrate. So what carried over well, and then maybe what are you having to still kind of relearn?
Well, usually, so I like, especially within our tribe, within the Christian Missionary Alliance, I love our founder, who basically said that we need to raise up an army of irregulars if we're going to complete the mission. And so I would say that I'm definitely an irregular. And so then come up the traditional model, like like you said, high school, Bible school, seminary, and then applying for a local church. I'm your second career guy, right? So I've had other careers and then kind of slipped in the back door for ministry. And so a lot of lessons learned, kind of like what you were saying before as well, that the military and law enforcement gave me some great administrative vision casting skills so that I was able to communicate well what we were going. What ends up happening with your apostolic is that we talk all the time about big vision, okay, but we don't get into the details. So as a training NCO, I had to give specific details. Those who are on my team, from the corporals on down, they all knew, be able to communicate with the officers what we were doing, what supplies we needed, what things that we had to kind of get. And so it taught detail. It's that detail is not normally my natural mode. And so I'm like big picture. So I'm like usually how I explain that is when I tell people, I said, listen, so if we have a mountain And the goal is, to get to the mount, go up the mountain. So me, I'm like, hey, let's get up the mountain. Motivate everybody to get up the mountain. And then you have those that are like, whoa, wait. Don't we have to talk about, like, don't we need water and food? And
what's the plan to get up the mountain, boss?
like, just charge the hill. So anyway, the military law enforcement helped me work out the details.
Yeah.
And that has been a tremendous gift. Now, the flip side of the military and law enforcement aspect of it is that I'm used to giving orders and not explaining myself.
Right.
Or I have expectations on others that they understand. So in the military and law enforcement, we have a code of conduct. We have all this other stuff that we beat into us. And so I don't have to constantly be explaining myself because we're all drinking the same Kool-Aid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, in ministry, that's not the same thing at all. We're drinking 15,000 different Kool-Aids.
Yeah.
Trying to all get together. And so I think I'm communicating well. I think I'm processing well, but I'm leading and giving orders and moving forward. And the people are like, well, we like you, but we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah. And we don't know if you know what you're doing.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, so it's been so what I've learned being 58 years of age now, and really I would say that my sons at 32, 31, and 28 have been a great sounding board since they've been with me through the whole process and know all of my dysfunctions and all of my idiosyncrasies, and really help me kind of think through that I need to use the gifts God's given me, which calls 2 ears to listen, 1 mouth to talk, and usually keep the mouth quiet and listen more.
Yeah.
And so where I come to a decision real quick, I'm ready to move forward, but that decision works for me, but that might not work. For everybody else. So anyway, it's been I'm still figuring that out. I'm not saying I got that together.
Yeah. And I think it's a lifelong process. So I'm like you, I tell people, I'm like, I wasn't born a pastor. I didn't come into it as late as you did, but I had plenty of other experience before I got into church work, And so I tell people on my end, the thing that has been really helpful, both from the military and from I was a truck driver for a little while. I was in the construction industry for a minute, worked on a horse farm and a ranch or whatever. And so you learn people, right? Like being NYPD and in the Army, I'm sure you meet all kinds of different people and
all kinds.
Which has really enhanced ministry. You're not just like an insider in the church world. You connect well with people outside. But the thing for me that I struggle with is I'm probably, like you said, there's certain assumptions or expectations that I'm just like, hey, everybody already knows, let's go, and can make me a little less patient with people who are like, look, if you don't have to figure out, I'm just going to transfer you, okay? We're sending you to a different unit. We're going to send you down the street to the Baptist church, and maybe that's a better fit.
Well, I will say that probably one of the things, Norma, who has had to endure the last 38 years, and Norma is stable and secure, and I'm giving her the forest, and she's like, I don't care about the forest. Tell me what my tree is, okay? And so, and it's like, we used to have all these struggles in the early years until we just realized that this is how Norma's shaped and this is how I'm shaped. And when it came to anything I led, I realized that I'm comfortable, which is probably one of my hangups. I'm very comfortable doing it on my own.
Yeah.
I feel confident in how God shaped me and molded me. I'm confident about where my strengths and weaknesses are. And I'm like, I'll take that wherever I can go. But that'll take me so far. I can go 10 times farther if I have a team.
Right.
So I realized in the early years, my mistake was I was looking to work with guys and gals who were like me.
Yeah.
it was a disaster
Mm-hmm.
because we're all running in 50,000 places and we all
Yeah.
get, and we were just burning people out like nuts. And I'm like, ooh, that does not work.
Yep.
And so a lot of lessons learned in New York, my first plant. I mean, I feel terrible about so many people I ended up hurting, not intentionally, but because
Right.
I'm just so driven. And the
You're just
leaders I
running the
brought were
race.
so driven. We're just running over people.
Yeah.
You're not spiritual. I mean, like,
Yeah.
let's go follow Jesus.
Yep. Yeah, I forget where I heard the quote, but somewhere along the way I heard, you can probably, well, not probably, you can run faster by yourself, but you'll go farther if you bring others with you.
Exactly.
It's like we might have to slow this train down, which is going to kill me slowly.
Correct. Correct. And I think that was one of the things that the transition for me in Florida was that I had to bring people on my team who were not like me. Matter of fact, guys and gals
intentionally
who were opposite of me, who were going to literally technically slow it down, but we'd get way further down the road.
Yeah.
Now that initially that made no sense to me. Like, no, we have to run. To go slow, to go farther, made no sense. There's a kingdom principle there. I'm still figuring that puppy out too. But at the end of the day, God's doing it.
Right.
And so God can go exceedingly further. And actually, it ended up saving Norma and I's marriage because I was running all over the place. She's looking for stability, and I'm not the most stable guy. And because, I'm looking for the next new thing and the next new thing.
No, good lessons to learn, although they're tough. So,
all right.
So speaking of people and different places, different experiences, I was going to ask you a culture question, which is, Brooklyn and Florida and Texas all have very, very, very different cultures. And if you came down to Texas, still being, Sergeant DeJesus from the NYPD, you wouldn't connect well with people. If I went up to Brooklyn, boy, I would be fish out of water, so big. So you have to, if God puts you in a culture, you have to lead people within like the construct of that culture. So in your experience, what are some lessons you've learned about leading different people in different cultures that you could share with us? How do you connect with folks and lead them?
Yeah, so it goes back to relationship, I think the key piece. So in New York, which we tend to be, it's a business town and it's an immigrant town. So when people move to New York, they're there to work, make a living, job, career, advancement, whatever. Everything's moving fast. And so we're not very social.
Yeah.
So, people think we're rude.
We just got places to be. We got work to do.
It's like there's two speeds in New York. Okay. Like fast or get out of the way. Okay. That's all there is.
No small talk, no coffee breaks.
No. Just get to the point. Let's get her done. And so, which resonates with me. Now you go to Florida. And so the principles that I use to plant a church in New York, I tried to do in Florida. What a disaster. The Bible didn't change. The principles of the kingdom didn't change. But the method of how we do it, that changes.
Yeah.
So different people, different culture, different dynamic. I'll give you just a simple example. So in New York City, which is basically 8 million documented people, okay, is an anthill. The only city like it in the U.S. There's no land to spread out. Everything's just congested and up. So there's no room really to meet. So that culturally, meeting in each other's homes is a downright necessity. So when you start ministry, you invite people. I can go off the street in Brooklyn and see a total stranger and say, "Hey, I'm having a barbecue at my house. You want to come?" And he'll say, "Hey, sure. Can I bring a friend?" Now I'm in Florida, trying to start connection, which I think relationally is fine. It's just, "Hey, listen, we're gonna have a barbecue at the house. Would you want to come?" And then this is at church. We were at a First Alliance church there, and when we first got there, I'm inviting church folk to my house for a barbecue. I'm new to the area. Whatever. I'm a pastor in the Alliance. Okay. And the answer is no.
Yeah.
And so, well, let me get back to you, whatever. And okay, this went on for months. I'm like, what in the, do I smell? I mean, like, what in the world is going on here? Even church folk, I can't connect with anybody. So what I ended up finding out was the secret sauce was two things. One, you never invite people to your home. Too personal in Florida. Everybody has big houses and such. You want to meet somebody for the first time socially? Perkins, Bob Evans, go out to a restaurant, whatever.
Right.
So I can make sure I kind of like you first, and
Right,
maybe
yeah.
eventually. But like if I go to your house, then I'd be obligated to invite you back, and I don't even know if I even like you enough to invite you back. I mean, just it's all these little cultural nuances. You're sitting there going like, "Where's the book on this puppy?"
Yeah.
So we figured that out. So now, okay, we're inviting everybody out to eat. Man, you never go out to eat in restaurants in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Too expensive.
Yeah.
Just the average Joe is going to cook at home, going to eat at home. Anyway, so big, huge cultural difference. The second cultural difference, too, is that naturally meeting in the home, especially with kids, you invite, we at the time we had our boys were young, and we were inviting other families to come to our house. None of the families would come in the house. Then we connected with this one family. Their house was like half the size of ours, and they're packing their house out. I'm thinking, man, what in the world is going on, man? Why are they packing out the house? I'm not packing out the house. I can't get one family to come to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out what the other secret sauce is. Their house had a pool.
I was just about to say, I bet they have a swimming pool.
Okay, my house bigger. No pool. So no parent wants to be in the house with their kids running around the house, jumping off the furniture. They'd rather than being in the pool where they could whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's all these little nuances that I think of. Sometimes this is why I always go with the guy boots on the ground. You live in your city. You understand your culture. I don't. Tell me what you need and how you see it's going to work. And so that's kind of basically been my mantra in this role as the church planning director for our district, and saying, I just sit with pastors, tell me what your dream is, and then how can I help you do your dream?
So let the leadership take place at the speed of whatever relationships.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, culture is so interesting, man. And when we moved to a small town in North Carolina that was like old South. And I'm a Southern boy, but I'm not like old South. And so we moved there, and I was trying to explain to them how there was all these cultural things that I needed them to tell me. And I said, look, it's like I'm walking through this field that everyone else knows is a minefield, but I don't know that there's not any signs up and all this.
Right.
And so
exactly.
I'm just walking around, and all of a sudden I step on a landmine and I get blown up, and everybody's like, hey, why'd you step on that, that spot? And you're like, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know you people don't respond to this, or they, when I say this, it means that, it's like, so,
Right.
So yeah, it's like, the relationships kind of determine so many different things about whether people will follow you, whether, whether you're in or not. It's very complicated. Eddie, one of the other focuses of the podcast, which you do a lot of this, but is about communicating. And so the way I frame it for everybody is, I say, my theory is people can identify with your failures much more than they can your successes, because everybody knows what failure feels like. So rather than ask people to tell me about a time when you just really succeeded at communicating, is tell me about a time when you failed at it, and what'd you learn from it? And after that instance, is there anything about how you approach communication that changed?
I'd probably say the bulk of my ministry has been one failure after another. And I'm probably thinking what would be catalytic. So one, I would say, which I'm not going to hit on at this time because it'll take too long. One would be the marriage issue between Norm and I. We were almost at divorce's door, but that's a topic for another day. I would probably say I hit a huge ministry failure. I mean, catastrophic. I was ready to quit. Done. I'm like, the worst pastor. I'm like, I'm not really good at this. It's just like, I don't know what I was thinking. I should
Right.
have just stayed a cop. At least I was good at that. I knew what the rules were.
Right.
There's like no rules with this ministry stuff. It's like
That's totally
everything's
true. Totally true.
so when we moved to Florida, the cultural nuances were all different, So I'm an inner city, New York City kid from Brooklyn, now in Florida, and looking to reach out into the community. And a lot of it was good because Norma and I, we were young and we had little kids, and there was a lot of young families that were moving into the city, and there was almost no ministry for young families and kids. And we started in a school because there was no place to meet. None of the churches in town would have touched us. And I asked. And so we started to grow. First year, we're at 100. Second year, we're at 200. Third year, we're at 300. Year 3.5, we're at 350. We're running multiple services now. We're running as hard as we could possibly be. The school board voted in a new school board superintendent. And the first thing she did was, I want no churches in my schools. And so we were paying back in 04, 05, almost $4,000 a month for the school. Instead of doing 2 Sunday, we went to a Saturday night based on, I did a survey, and a lot of the young families, getting up early in the morning was hard for them. They whatever.
Yeah.
So I said, let's try Saturday night. I mean, if it doesn't work, I'll just go back. I'll do 2 Sundays. And the Saturday nights exploded. So you can't basically say I don't want churches and allow other nonprofits in there. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
It's illegal under our Constitution. Right. So what happened was she raised our rent to $12,000 a month, which was,
Holy moly.
Yeah, we couldn't.
Which is a legal way of kicking you out.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's how, anyway, God had ended up, I thought we were done and whatever. And then God, a whole bunch of amazing circumstances, another conversation. We ended up buying this old Presbyterian building that had 4 acres. It was small, run down, but it was going to be ours.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, wow, okay, we'll have, instead of us having just 3 hours on a Sunday and 3 hours on a Saturday, we're going to have 7 days a week. We're going to have all this opportunity for ministry. We got our own property. Okay. My mind went crazy thinking of all the outreach opportunities. Well, we ended up moving into this old Presbyterian building, and I mean old.
Yeah.
And so the bulk of the people that were coming to the church were all unchurched, de-churched, lost people. So Florida is an older culture, and so basically meeting in a school is not considered legitimate ministry.
Right.
So we weren't getting any church folk coming to our services. It just happened to be, we were doing so many outreaches with families and kids, we were getting all the families from the school coming. Now we're in a church building, old A-frame,
Yep,
built in the 60s.
have a steeple
glass.
on it.
Yeah, stained glass.
Yeah.
The carpeting was 15 years old with holes on it. It smelled old. It was. In Florida, basically, most of the ministries, when they start the churches there, are reaching out to seniors who don't have kids.
Right.
So our Sunday mornings, we were having over 80 plus kids.
Wow.
And there were these tiny little closet rooms that they had. They were offices and whatever. When we first got there, we had children's classrooms in the hallway, in the fellowship hall. It was loud. It was chaotic. And the place needed so much work. And the school that we were in was brand new, tons of parking in the front. We had the ESL classes that had their own private bathrooms, huge space. Now we're into this old, musty, and within 6 months, half the congregation was gone. Half the congregation is gone. I'm now trying to do a building fundraiser to finish off purchasing this building. All my leaders are done. I burnt them all out. I started out with my faithful little launch team, and we were growing so fast, So when I would build structures, okay, first year we'll build structures and teams for like 60 people. First year we're over 100.
Yeah.
By the time I try to build it to 150, we're at 200. And so my faithful core team that with me from the beginning, they just kept on adding up. And we just kept on staggering. Then I added Saturday. So now, and all of us had families with little kids. So now my team, they're working 5 days a week and then preparing for services Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
3 years in a row. And so when we thought about the building in their minds, now we can power down. We have facilities. We can relax.
This is the thing we've been working toward getting.
Yes. When they got into the building and they saw all the amount of work it was going to take, they were like, hey.
Yeah.
So half the congregation leaves. My whole leadership team is gone. And I'm like, I'm the worst pastor ever. I'm ready to quit. I'm done. And so at the time, I can't remember how I got the connection, but there are these wealthy Christian businessmen in Dallas who they have 1,000-acre ranch that these guys pay for everything for pastors who are burnt out, and they have counselors there. They pay for counselors there. You're on this ranch, and you can stay there up to a month.
Wow!
To get rejuvenated. Yeah, and so I ended up going there for a month. I'm like, Lord, I told Norm, I said, if the Lord doesn't speak to me, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I was done. And so I left. Went to this ranch. No internet. There's nothing out there. And the Lord just spoke to me in a huge way. There was a lot of weeping and repenting going on because I was so driven. I had that New York of like, build big, big. This is the model. And it's like, where do you read that in the Bible? Like, did I ask you to do any of that stuff? I just called you to proclaim the gospel, make disciples, train up believers, just love people. I'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you've been in the way. Step out of the way. Let me be God. And, you're going to see. Okay. Yeah. And so I came back. Never again will I do ministry or encourage anybody to do ministry in that mode. And I said, we're going to do this slow, steady. We're going to move as fast as people are able to move. And we're going to wait on the Lord for all of the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that began this whole, where we started then developing leaders and investing in people and how the whole church planning thing ended up coming out.
So was it a particular communication failure along the way? Was it that you were communicating your drive, let's go, but you weren't listening to them or communicating these other things to them? Like, what was the particular communication failure?
It wasn't my communication. Because of military and law enforcement, I put everything on paper, right? So everything's vision statement, mission statement, objectives, whatever. And so my struggle was that, and this was my brokenness, was that if you weren't running with me, I left you behind.
Yeah.
So you had faithful, committed people who loved what God was doing and all these other things, but I was taking them and I was making them do things that they weren't shaped and molded. I wasn't loving them. I was using them. It's a big, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, God brought some huge conviction in my life that is not what I've called you to. And so, I'm calling you to give your life away, not use people to get your agenda done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just a huge turnaround for me. And so my communication, all the other stuff, it's just that now it became like, how do I leverage that, Eddie, to come alongside my leaders' dreams?
Yeah.
Big difference. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's a huge shift. It's a huge shift. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think inherently people who lead or want to lead or feel called to lead or whatever you want to say tend to have some kind of vision of where we're going, and the tendency, because you and I are so much alike. my tendency was always like, what are y'all doing? Get up. Like, we've been taking a break for 30 years. Like, we don't need break time. What we need is to hit the gym and get in shape so we can run,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But in the end, you find out, like you said, God brings this conviction that you're actually using folks. Well, last question I was going to ask you, Eddie, is, and you may have answered this in your answers to the other questions, but if now the old wise Eddie DeJesus on the other side of conviction and all that could visit with young Sergeant DeJesus, who maybe knew everything or thought he knew everything, what would you tell this young guy?
Yeah. I would probably, which is pretty much what I say now all the time. The top-down mindset of corporate America, which is built into the American mindset, is not kingdom at all. And so, not that there's anything bad in them. It can be used for bad. I would even say it's a good thing. It's just not the best thing.
Yeah.
The best thing is the fact that we're in an upside down kingdom. And so we saw that in the life of Jesus, who fully man, fully God, and deserved all the glory and all the honor, got off the table, got onto his hands and knees, took a towel around, and cleaned the dung off of his disciples' feet. And when Peter said, no, don't clean my feet, Jesus said, you can have nothing of me. I mean, think of the implications of what that means. And he says, and then if we're going to be followers of Jesus, he says, that's what we're supposed to do. It's not about titles, it's not about positions, it's not how big our church is, how big our budgets are, it's not how many people we have. I mean, these are not bad things. Matter of fact, I'd even say in a nice, they're good things, but that's not the best thing.
Right.
And learning, for me at my age, as I'm trying to learn, okay, Eddie, I usually tell young bucks now, I said, listen, I've wasted my life pursuing all these good things: job, career, money, houses. My sons have a TV in every room. Back in the day, VCRs. Yeah. VCRs and such. But you know what they didn't have? A dad at home. Because I was so busy working. And I look back, good things. But the best thing would have been that I would have been home, and they had less TVs and we had less money, and we would have been just fine.
No, that's good, man. And one of the things I really enjoy about sitting down with people on this podcast is it's people like you that I know and I get to see from time to time, but you don't get to really sit down and self-reflect and kind of dive into experiences beyond, a real kind of shallow level just because of time. So to hear you share your story, your journey, lessons learned, convictions along the way, it's helpful for me, but I pray that it's helpful. Whoever ends up listening to this thing, I pray it's helpful for them too, because your experiences aren't unique to you,
Right.
The struggle with kids, I've got 5 of them at home. Like my wife and I talk about those exact same things all the time. Change out VCR for iPad or something, and it's the same,
exactly.
It's the same struggle. And so you want to do well and honor God, and things that feel like they're important now, talking to guys like you remind me maybe they're not as important as they feel.
Amen.
Anyway, well, I appreciate your time, brother, and praying for you with the church planting, that God uses all those experiences to bless our district and people you come in contact with, ultimately to build the kingdom. So I love you and appreciate you, man.
Same here, brother. Appreciate you giving me the time to talk.
Yeah. And thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. The Leading Lounge is brought to you by Communicate to Care, where we are building better leaders by building better people. For more information, visit us online at www.communicatecare.com. This is your host, Dr. Justin Dubose, and we'll see you next time, right here in the Leading Lounge.